All right. Steve, thanks for doing this.
Absolutely.
You were at Amazon for 18 years. You interviewed over 1,000 people and made it all the way to principal engineer, but you didn't start from the classic CS major in college, 5 software engineering internships, you graduated with a sweet return offer. So tell me, what was the story of how you actually made it to Amazon in the first place?
Yeah. I think it starts in my undergrad, so into University of Washington. And I don't tell this story very often, but I came in. I had done the AP Computer Science courses in high school, and I wanted to do computer science at UW, but I partied too much and didn't take it seriously and crashed and burned, and I got let go for academic performance. And then it's just like a really, really big departure from my expectations in high school because I'm a good test taker, and high school was super easy for me, and so this idea that I would like potentially die and not have a college degree, that hit me super hard. And so I'm like, okay, like that was the wake up call, and I turned it around. And so I just started to think about like, okay, I had applied to get back into school before, and they denied me. And so I was thinking like, okay, well, what do they actually want to see in a petition to get back in? And so I just reverse engineered it, and I was able to get in. It boiled down to like, they probably want to see like what changed. And so I needed to describe what changed. So, okay, I went to therapy and did all this other stuff. And so I got back in, and then I decided like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm going to kill it and I don't waste this opportunity. So I made the dean's list for, the rest of the time at school, super high GPA. Didn't counterbalance like the terrible GPA that I got, but for the last, 2 years or something like that, it was super good. I wasn't able to get into computer science, but I had taken some courses and did pretty well. And then I ended up getting a creative writing degree, which turned out to be like a lot more useful than I thought it was going to. Minored in math and applied math and that sort of stuff. And so, in 2005, 2006, when I graduated, I was looking for any job, to be quite honest with you. And, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, started at Amazon, and he told me that, hey, there's a contract position open for a support engineer. I can get you an interview. Like, let's do it. And so I was just like, okay, here's my opportunity. And with my previous experience with the computer science stuff, so I understood, big O notation and basic data structures and algorithms from like 4 or 5 years before that. I was able to land the job. And from there, I was able to go from contractor to full-time. And then this sort of like concept of like reverse engineering what other people want to see, that really helped me with the interview, but it also helps me like to make that transition to SDE. And so I was like, oh, okay, they're going to ask me coding questions. They're going to ask me behavioral questions. Like, what is the anatomy of the person that they're looking for? And so when I took that sort of approach to it, I was able to study effectively. This is before LeetCode. This is before you could watch YouTube videos on this subject. So that's basically my origin story.
So something I want to focus on here is you mentioned how at the beginning of that story, you were really struggling. You were, distracted, your grades fell. And then it seems like almost immediately, it was just one shift and then you fixed everything. So like, what was that? How can you just go from, being kicked out of school or dropping out of school and then immediately having like that almost overnight shift? And then you go to like making the dean's list, to getting amazing grades later on, and then ending up at a great company like Amazon. What was that shift that happened right there?
If you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, the TLDR is basically, if you want to achieve behavior change, you have to start first with an identity change, right? So your self-identity, how do you perceive yourself? And it was literally that thought that I had all of this potential, but that I might die without getting a college degree. Like that thing, it scared me so much. Both of my parents are immigrants, and, they came to this country with nothing, and they both got their, degrees at, in engineering at, an American university. And, my entire family, really well educated, and that's just kind of a thing with Asian families. And so I was like, oh my God, like I had all of this potential and all of this opportunity in front of me, and I've just squandered it. And so that was the switch that flipped. And so I don't think it would have really worked had I not sort of like inspected my identity, and then just been like, okay, well, actually, I'm a person that's going to get a college degree. That means that I need to go and do all of these other things, instead of saying like, oh, here's all of the things that I need to do in order to achieve this outcome. Is you sort of like invert that. That's the trick to changing your behavior.
There's a lot I took away from that, but I think a big one is it seems like people are very often change their life from a bit of a negative stimulus, right? I think we're told nowadays that, okay, you should shoot for your dreams. You should think about your big goals in life. Where do you want to go? And then think of all the ways to do it. But often if you look at really successful people, usually it's a bit of like a scare or a negative, or I like to call it like an FTE, or like a fuck this event, which is essentially like, dude, I cannot live like this anymore. Yeah. Someone I recently talked to, our mutual friend Navi, he from NeetCode, he also had a moment like this where he had quit Amazon after 2 months famously. Yeah. And he was in this deep depression. He could barely even like look at his computer screen anymore. And he also had a moment where he was like, dude, like I cannot be like this. I need to do something. And that something was LeetCode for him, and posting a video every day. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I feel like people, when they change their life, they usually have like a bit of like an FT, like a singular moment where they decide things are going to be different.
The way I think about it is negative stimulus is very strong, right? So think about it like a rat running away from a cat. He's very motivated to get away. I think the problem with negative stimulus is it doesn't necessarily imply that you have something that you're running towards. And so the positive stimulus would be like, hey, I want a job, or I want a college degree, or I would like to be successful. It's like a rat trying, seeing cheese sort of like, high up, and it's going to be difficult to get to. Yeah, he's motivated to try to get there and maybe problem solve, but not in the same way as when a cat is running, towards him. And so, I think it's really common to run away from things, and to harness that negative energy. I think that's really powerful. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are using it in tandem with a direction. If you don't have a direction, then you're going to spend your energy running away, but it might not amount to anything.
Yeah, I agree. The strongest motivation comes from when you have a cat behind you and a cheese in front of you, right? Yeah. It's something you're running away from, but also somewhere you're going towards. Yeah. So it sounds like you resonated with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that people understand this. That people understand the like negativity that can come from a particular situation. And at some point, there's a breaking point, and you kind of just want to flip a table. I do think that those are the moments that really instigate change. But a lot of people will just be like, well, I'm just going to disengage, right? Like, hey, I hate this situation. I'm going to disengage. I'm going to cut off all communication with the outside world. I'm going to pick up and move and figure out what's going on there. And so I think that that's super common, and actually potentially detrimental, not necessarily in the sense that like, in terms of long-term outcomes, but in terms of like short-term and medium-term outcomes, they're just sort of like trying to find themselves by doing subtraction. They're going to remove the elements of their environment that don't serve them, and then try to find themselves. But because the search space is so high, right? If you want to talk about some computer science stuff, you may not find anything, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I worry about the advice where people they're like, oh, I have this FTE, I have this bad situation, but they don't marry it with a target. They just have the experience, and so then they run around aimlessly, and you can lose many years just from that situation.
Yeah, I'll tell you about my FTE. Was about a year and a half ago, I had got my first full-time software engineering job. It was like in the six figures. It's what every computer science student wants in life, is to get a great, stable, high-paying software engineering job. And it was okay. Like I liked my team, I liked my boss. It was quite a small company, so there were only about 15 engineers. So I actually sat by the founder and CEO every single day. So he was like directly involved with me. He was my direct manager. And during my 9 or 10 month one-on-one where we discussed, promotion, he said, Aman, I think you're really talented. Like I can see a lot of potential here, but I just need to see about 10 or 20% more. And then, we'll promote you to mid-level come summer, totally fine. Yeah, I think you're on that track, but we just need about 20% more. Need that button to seat to be a bit longer. Just push a little bit more code and then you'll be good to go. And I asked myself, why was I not already doing that? Because there were engineers at my company who were coming in on the weekends occasionally. They would show up super early. They would leave really late. So why wasn't I one of them? Well, it's because in the morning I would wake up and instead of coding, I would work on YouTube. And then during lunch, I would take an extra long lunch break to work on YouTube. And then after work, I would leave right at 5:05 p.m. so I could go home and work on YouTube. So I asked myself the question, what would it take to put in that extra 20%? Well, it would have to come from somewhere and have to come from YouTube. So why would I sacrifice the thing I actually want to do full time for, potentially getting a $15,000 or $20,000 raise at something I kind of only liked a little bit? So that was my FT. It was like, okay, dude, what am I doing with my life right now? Like, why am I going for a promotion I don't care about? And it was kind of like running away from that towards my dream, which is to be a full-time creator, YouTuber, entrepreneur, which ended up happening and working out really well. Wonderful. So I think that kind of exemplifies a point, which is like you need somewhere to run away from, but you need something to go towards as well to have the best effect. Listen up. If you're struggling to land an amazing software engineering full-time job or internship, or if you submitted dozens of applications and you feel like nothing is working, or if you failed multiple online assessments and interviews, or you just feel like you don't understand the process to land a great offer in the market of today, I actually run a school for people like you called the Software Engineering Accelerator. Now, over the past year, we've helped dozens of people land incredible jobs at internships at companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla, Salesforce, Adobe, LinkedIn, Capital One, MongoDB, JP Morgan, and the list goes on. And the best part about our program is that we actually guarantee the outcome. If you don't get the full-time job or internship you want, you don't pay. So if you'd like to work directly with me and my team of FANG recruiters and engineers to land an incredible job in tech guaranteed, click the top link in the description and submit an application to join us. Let's talk software engineering interview prep.
Okay.
You've said that most interview prep is garbage. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's a clickbaity title, so, that's how you get the views on the YouTube. But I think when it comes down to it, people aren't thinking about, they're not doing that reverse engineering that I was talking about. They're not putting themselves in the shoes of the person asking the questions. They're thinking about the interview like a test. And I think a better mental model is one where you think about an interview as a date, right? Suppose you're on a date and you're basically like, hey, what's the big O of that algorithm? It's just like, what? Like, why would, no, there's two people and they're trying to see if there's a connection there, that it's a good match. And, they both bring something to the relationship potentially, and they're both looking for different things, or they might be looking for the same thing. And so you're trying to find that match. The problem is that usually the candidate is super desperate. And so what ends up happening is, they'll take whatever they can get, right? And people, like employers and the opposite sex, or whoever you're going, like they can sense that desperation. And so if you go into it, if you went into a date as though you went in, it was a test, that's the wrong move. And so a lot of this prep is basically like, okay, well, the test is going to be code. Like, all right, most places, they kind of want you to explain your problem solving, like what's going on in your head, to think out loud. But if you're just like hyper focused on like leak code and trying to like solve the problem, you might miss the part where like the interviewer is trying to like understand whether I want to work with this person, whether they're a decent problem solver, that sort of thing. Like if you're just hiring people that just memorize leak code, that's not very high signal, right? And so, I think for the coding aspects, like people aren't thinking out loud, it's becoming less and less of a signal nowadays as we sort of move to a commodity world for prep. And so this like hyper focus on leak code, like, yeah, most people don't know the leak code stuff where they could do better. But at the end of the day, like if you wanted to learn those concepts, You just like come up with a study plan and then go after it, right? When it comes to system design, I think most system design is like a conversation. Like actual system design is not done with a rando and a whiteboard or Excalidraw on a 45-minute call. Like, you know, I've designed a ton of systems. System design takes like a bunch of like, it takes many days, many weeks, potentially months. You got to bring in a bunch of people into the room. You have to understand what exists already. You have to kind of understand where the business is going and the tech stack is going. And you know, there are a number of constraints that are layered on. There might be trade-offs involved. You're always working in a situation of partial information. That's system design. Like talking about functional and non-functional requirements on how to build like the Facebook feed, and, you know, and talk about like why I chose this database over this other database. Oh, okay, by the way, scale it to, you know, 1 billion users or whatever. That's not system design. That's like concepts of a plan. That's like a system design conversation. And so what is the signal that the interviewer is trying to get? They're trying to figure out whether this person understands some of the basic concepts of system design, and then we can sort of like figure out, like, did they memorize the solution from one of these books? Or are they conversant in a lot of these topics? And then, you know, as I like constrain the problem or ask you to scale up the problem, like, can you do that sort of like gymnastics that will allow us to have a reasonable conversation about the topic in question? And so, people are conflating system design with the system design interview, and it drives me nuts. And people are like, oh yeah, okay, so yes, you have to go and figure out, you know, whether you should use SQL or NoSQL, or like, you know, whether Redis is going to be, you know, a good choice or not, or like load balancers or reverse proxies, and, you know, like all this web server stuff. Like, I get it, but at the end of the day, like, you can't like just memorize these things and try to memorize what other folks are going to ask you. You have to be in a spot where you can have a conversation about the design that's going on. And then I think the last bit is like when it comes to behavioral interviews, in the pie diagram, in the pie chart of like interview prep, people are putting like 60% of their time into the leak code. They're putting 30% of their time into system design or something close like that. And then there's the like donate to charity pie slice, which is the behavioral. And it drives me insane, because actually in a world where, you know, people are just memorizing leak code questions, and, you know, there are a ton of resources for the system design interview, the behavioral interview is crazy undervalued. And because I had done so many interviews and I was a bar raiser and I trained bar raisers, and I literally trained thousands of people at Amazon on how to conduct technical interviews. Like, the behavioral part is actually how we level people. Like a strong showing in the behavioral side can actually make up for like a middling like performance on the functional aspects. And so I just think the proportions are all off. You know, yeah, go learn the leak code stuff. Go learn the system design interview stuff. I think that's fine. Spend maybe 25% of your time. So that would represent like a 5x increase in the amount of like prep on your behavioral stuff. That's why I think most of the prep is garbage. Just the proportions are all off.
You mentioned how leak code has become commoditized. Something special about your background is that you've been in this industry for almost 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
So you're able to look at a full scope of things. I'm sure you were there when leak code was created, leak code started to be used. Like, you probably know the beginning, the middle, and the fall, which I think we're in the fall of leak code currently. So? And I want to hear your thoughts. Like, tell me about why was leak code created? Why were leak code style interviews initially used? Pros, cons, and where are we today concerning DSA and leak code interviews?
If you step back, the fundamental problem is that you need to hire people that are good software developers or whatever it is. And you can't hire them like temporarily. You have to hire them full time. But there's some places.
Internships, kind of.
Yeah. So I think an internship is the best interview. like obviously there's a pre-interview part or whatever, but like you work at a place for 3 months to 6 months, that you become a known quantity. That would be the best. If we could do that for essentially all roles, I think that would be really great. But we can't do that. So we have to compress this 3 months into like 5-6 hours of interviews. And so then the question becomes, okay, like what's high signal and what's not high signal? And so the genesis of system design questions, for instance, was that, okay, well, nobody's gonna be able to talk about system design elements if they've never designed a system before. And so it was like, okay, cool. We can design the Twitter feed or whatever it is, and like nobody's gonna know how to do that unless they built a similar system before. So it was really high signal. But then, these books come out, all these videos come out, and it's starting to lose some of its signal. When you go to the coding questions, when I was trying to get into the industry, like you just had to Google for it. And I basically went on the internal wiki search for like all of the coding questions that they asked people. Just conducted a bunch of Google searches. There were a bunch of other sites that were out there, but like I had to like compile all of these questions on my own, and then I had to like go and figure out how to do it by firing up the IDE and then like working through them myself. And so like that is actually really high signal. Like that's a good thing, right? Like people, like doing their like deep research and then like coming up with a study plan for things where there aren't a lot of resources. I think that's really high signal. Those coding questions, you could go and get a computer science degree, but like a lot of the times, like nobody would stand a chance unless they had coded before, right? So it was super high signal in that sense. Before that, Microsoft used to ask like brain teasers. They used to ask questions like, how would you move Mount Fuji, right? And it's that turned out to be really low signal. But it's just this thing where you have so many people that are trying to get a job. How can you effectively filter down that population to the people that would be successful for whatever you're hiring for, and do it in a way where you're kind of okay with people that could do well, but just filtering them out aggressively, in favor of like really not having anybody that wouldn't be effective join the company.
So where did that change? I feel like maybe about 10 years ago, LeetCode kind of went viral with these tech companies. Mm-hmm. Actually, with the LeetCode platform, I find it interesting how we literally call it LeetCode. LeetCode is a private company that's been attached to this kind of coding interviews, similar to Kleenex to like a facial tissue, or I think jacuzzi to a hot tub, right? So now it's literally like we call it LeetCode interviews, but that's just the name of a company, right? Yeah. So tell me, like, when did you see the company LeetCode pop up? When did you see, like, around when did that kind of style of interview just become kind of the mainstay and go viral? And what do you think about these, in the past 6 months, these AI interview solvers? Oh, yeah. Right? These LeetCode solvers that people are supposedly using in these interviews, plugging in just like, ChatGPT, even ChatGPT on the side can solve a lot of these OAs, right? So talk to me about like the middle and the end of LeetCode, and where do you think we go from here coding interview wise? Yeah, so I will start at the beginning. I think the beginning of people sort of like hacking the interview came from Gail's book, Cracking the Coding Interview, and elements of interview programming, EIP, whatever the name of it is. And so like the modality was books. You bought the book and then you read it and you're like, oh, this is what they ask. And so it's like these types of resources do amazingly well because they've aggregated this knowledge that was locked up behind a closed door. And so of course the book is going to be super successful. There were other sites before LeetCode. Like I seem to remember like Top Coder and stuff like that in the early to late 2000s. But really, like LeetCode was at this intersection of like, you can write code within an IDE. So we need basically, the concept of an IDE integrated within a browser. You need to source the questions, which by the way is like the hardest part. Like, do you know some people that do interviews? You're very unlikely to know them if you're just a new grad or trying to break into the industry. So that was part of the success as well. There's like 4,000 questions on the site. And then I think the next level thing was, they actually had like a forum and explainers in that editorial tab. I think I've had a LeetCode account for
close to 15 years, right? And so like the value is there. The value as a resource is there. And it's so valuable, it turns into a noun. And then when you get really, really popular, it turns into a verb, right? And so, yeah, I mean, people leak code now, right? Now, with these AI tools, obviously it makes for sensationalistic content. I think the guy that did the AI cheater thing, it became super famous. What I think is going to happen is that there are going to be more people flown in. You can't cheat on. When I started at Amazon, like the interview was on a literal whiteboard. You had to code on a whiteboard. Like, I don't think people have that experience before. Like, they literally wouldn't even issue you a laptop to type in. Like, you're like sitting there like writing out like for loops and stuff. I think that's coming back, right? So actually, two things there. One is like they're gonna fly you in, and that's just the way that it used to work. And so I think that's coming back, especially for higher end. And then the second thing is I think that the industry has softened up quite a bit, and they're going to be embracing AI tools. And so I do project that the coding interview will go away and turn into more of a like, hey, here's AI, here's an IDE with AI embedded inside of it. Make something that requires you to leverage that AI and your understanding to achieve an outcome, right? So I do think that generally, like the leak code style stuff will get phased out. I don't know how it's going to.
That's an amazing point. I didn't even think about that, how because of these AI tools, they're not going away, obviously, right? And they're only getting better at an exponential rate year by year by year. I'm sure the interview will almost become this like combination thing where they sit you down in a room, they give you a laptop that only has like, the most popular AI tools that the company uses. They almost give you like a bit of a like prompt, which is design a tool to do X, Y, and Z, right? And then they give you like 3 hours to create it and then demo it. I think that'd be an excellent kind of interview style. Fully integrating AI, being like, yeah, here are the most popular 3 to 5 AI tools at the cutting edge of what this company uses that are the most powerful versions, maybe even not for public use, right? And let's see what you can do with it. So I think that would actually be a more interesting interview.
I'll take it a step further, which is vibe coding is kind of the trend du jour. The way I define it, the way that Karpathy defined it, is basically, let's code but not look at the code. So I'm going to prompt it. I'm just going to accept all the changes and merge those in. If there's an error message, copy and paste the error message. But I'm not even going to look, right? Like, that's the essence of vibe coding. And that's great for toy projects and, sort of prototyping and seeing where it's going to take you. But I don't think that that's the mode that is going to be there in the future. What's going to happen is that people that are experienced are going to get UI, you're going to get AI. It'll be integrated everywhere. They're going to make changes. There's going to be multiple agents making changes all over the place, and they're going to like come back and show you their work. And then you actually need to read the code, and you need to be like, yeah, this is good. Actually, you're going in this crazy direction. Pull you back. Go this way. And then the code that you do accept is going to be high quality based off of it like coming back to you. So I think that like a good software developer now has a team. They represent a team now, right? So like a 10x developer is just you with 9 agents, right? And these agents are like, they're coding way faster than you ever could. You just think about like the sheer amount of code, like just even boilerplate and setting up your environment and stuff like that. That takes a long time. The one function that actually does the thing that you want is probably like 25 lines, and it's not anything to write home about, right? But like the everything else of the setup, yeah, just like let AI do that. And so, I think of it like, like royalty in like Europe somewhere that they go hunting, and it's just like, okay, well, there's this like butler that's holding like a silver tray with like a loaded gun for you, and then they like found the thing that you shoot at. And so basically the developer now just like takes it off and just like fires it. And then, like kind of goes there and then like goes, has lunch and tea or something like that, right? Like that's where we're headed to. I don't think we're going to be in a mode, I can't see it yet, where basically you just let the agent go on indefinitely without a human in the loop. I just don't see where the human is not going to be in the loop, simply because the AI, we've never really seen it just stomp a use case. Usually what it does is it does 80 to 95% of what we'd like. And that's very, very impressive. But that last 15, 20, 5%, the 1% that it doesn't quite get yet is actually really important. And so, when we see complete automations and we can trust it, I haven't seen a ton of that when it comes to this AI revolution that we've seen. And so, if you think about it, a teenager that spent dozens of hours can go and drive a car. You can teach it to learn how to drive a car. And then at some point you give it a license, give that person a license, and you let them go. And now they're free, at least in the US. How long has self-driving cars been a thing for AI? It just hasn't come here yet. And so that delta, I think is really, I think about that a lot. And I think about the fact that LLMs are really good at solving language problems. Driving is not a language problem, right? And so if you think about software development, there's the part of creating code, which is the syntax and the writing of the code. But then there's this sort of that last 20% is really poking at requirements, understanding the dependencies, understanding that broader code base, understanding a whole bunch of other things that aren't the code. And so, I feel like you can train a human to do that stuff sort of really easily, or we can try to force LLMs and all of these agents to do, that last little bit. It doesn't make sense to me.
I think the self-driving car analogy is a really good one here because, like you said, we've heard for the past 5, 10, 15 years, self-driving cars are coming. There are going to be no more drivers anymore. And I do think eventually, probably in the next decade, we will see the widespread acceptance of self-driving cars, self-driving trucks, because it is a bit of a bounded problem, right? There's only so many things that could really happen on the road in most use cases. But I think you have a great point, which is maybe, I know Tesla has their self-driving beta out for anyone who has a Tesla at this point.
Yeah.
So you get to play around with it. And that last 5 or 10% in a life or death situation,
very important.
Very important. That last 5 or 10% matters. I think another angle I like to take on this is AI is really good in going in a direction that you give it.
Yeah.
But the real question is that direction even worth exploring? Yeah. Right? If you have ChatGPT, for example, and you're asking it a bunch of crazy questions, and you can really convince it of a lot of crazy things even now. I think even Sam Altman admitted a few months ago that it's become too sycophantic. It's too weird how weird directions you can take this AI. And it doesn't really actually challenge you and take a step back and ask, okay, why are you even going down this direction? So I kind of akin it to autopilot on a flight, right? When you're flying a plane, I mean, I haven't flown a commercial jet, obviously, but the pilots, they don't do most of the work. This flight is pretty, I think it's during takeoff and landing. Sure, they're a little bit more involved, but during the actual flight, they're probably doing less than 5% of the actual steering, navigation, and stuff like that. But they're still there for that last 5% because it's a life or death situation. If something goes wrong, they need that pilot to be there. And also the pilot and the human set the direction for the plane, right? It's not like the plane is deciding where to go in the first place. They said, okay, take me from New York to Cancun, and then the plane systems, autopilot kind of takes you there. So that's kind of how I think about the world of AI. It'll be much easier to actually go somewhere, but we still need to set the direction. Yeah. So on that note, what kind of future do you feel like we're going towards when it comes to software engineering? Obviously, no one 100% knows, but do you feel like we're entering a world where everyone or the vast majority of people with technical skills, with software engineering knowledge are just going to be gone, completely out of the market? They're all getting jobs at McDonald's as garbage men? Or do you feel like we're entering a world where there'll be more software engineers? We'll just be leveraging 8 different AI agents and AI tools, and we're just taking 5 steps up on a higher level basis.
I mean, obviously, who knows? I do have some thoughts here. Anytime there's been a step change in terms of software development, more software developers have been needed. And I think that's going to continue. So just step all the way back. if you think about computation, like a computer is taking in, machine code and then doing a set of operations. And then we had like a higher order language, maybe assembly, right? Like you're sitting there like twiddling the registers, and then we're like, oh, okay, actually we can build, instead of like programming in machine code, bytecode, and then going to assembly, let's code in English, right? And so you get these Fortran, COBOL, you have these keywords, you have syntax involved, you build these abstract expression trees. People were like, oh, that's not going to work, and it did. And then, now the mode where there's like procedural like languages, right? And then we start to build things like object-oriented programming. We start to build things, functional programming, parallelism, multi-threading, that sort of stuff. Oh, hey, there's an IDE, by the way. You don't have to like hand, stitch together a bunch of like text files. We have an integrated environment. The IDE when I was, your age and maybe a little less was in DOS, and it had this like sort of like blue and red background. You had to press F5. Like it's crazy. Like, my first computer was IBM XT 8088, two 5.25-inch floppy disks, no hard drive, 640K of RAM. It was awesome, right? And I got my first C compiler, on that thing. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to, I can just compile to make an executable. And so we've been adding more and more abstract. Hey, now I can code in a browser. Hey, now, we can code on the client side with like web clients, and JavaScript. And now there's a concept of like a full stack developer or a front end developer. Oh, hey, by the way, everybody has the equivalent of a supercomputer in their pocket right now. And so like the invention of like the iPhone and sort of smartphones everywhere, that just made more and more, like the need for more and more programmers in the world to do all this cool stuff. When you think about web services, you went from like on-prem, like really big data centers to the cloud. It wasn't just that we shifted everything that was on-prem and these mainframes into the cloud. That wasn't the size of the market. The size of the market now turned into like, hey, look at all these SaaSes that can be built, because now you don't have to go and rent like rack space, right? And so, that exploded the amount of people. And so when the barriers to entry into creating code get lowered, more and more software developers get minted. Now the language of software development is literally English. It's not just like syntax where you're saying like for I, you're basically saying stuff like, hey, go and build me a mobile app that reminds me to take my supplements in the morning or something like that. And it can just like go off and do it. And it gets, 95% of the way there. I think that 5% is super important. And I think that the thing that was hard was like setting up like the scaffolding for the application and, bootstrapping everything. I think that just moves, more and more people can do that, or the AI just takes care of that. And that shifting frontier means that we can just take our attention to that new frontier, right? And so there's 25 million software developers right now. I think two things. One, the meaning of what it means to be a software developer is going to change. It's going to move towards that frontier, that last 5%. And more people are going to be like the value of that last 5% is just going to increase, because everybody can do that 95% now, right?
Wow. Yeah, I guess kind of talking about this note of software engineers just changing. I'm curious about, let's take a step back and look at, an 18-year-old. Mm-hmm. Let's say we're looking at an 18-year-old, just graduated high school, wants to get into software engineering, wants to take advantage of this new AI engineering, AI agents wave. What would you tell that person to get into the field? Should they go enroll in a computer science degree? Should they go do a boot camp? Should they just watch YouTube videos? What is that optimal career path for someone who wants to just ride this wave today? What would you suggest they do?
Two things. One, like AI is just happening so quickly. And whenever these seismic shifts happen, I think that the markets, humans, the type of work it can adapt if it's relatively slow, right? You think about the Industrial Revolution. Like, well, that didn't happen. There wasn't like one day we had the Industrial Revolution. There was like this T0 moment where everything just took off. It was this gradual thing. And it was gigantic and seismic, but it happened over the course of decades, right? And so we were able to at least adapt. There was a very large change in the way that the world worked, but it wasn't as disruptive as, say, like AI is right now, where you're talking about, depending on which metric you're looking at, like 10% growth or double-digit growth in AI per year, right? And so who knows what's going to happen, right? So like a lot of forecasts and looking into the future is going to be wrong, but I have some thoughts here. The big thing is this amplification, right? So it's never been easier to do your own thing. If you want to make a mobile app, if you want to create a website, if you want to do a side project with AWS and cloud and all of the toolkits that are there and all of the resources and AI, you can just go and do that, right? And so I think go into computer science if you're interested in computer science, but none of that is strictly necessary. If you're a self-learner, the world is open to you right now. It's just never been a better time to just like learn something for free on the internet. Like, it's crazy. And so that's one thing. The second thing is like, folks that are like my age, I'm like 42, like we look at AI with like skepticism and suspicion. Young folks, like they are embracing AI and AI tools. And I think that's a strength. And so they're going to be AI first. That's the differentiator. And so like go and create something and like figure out how to make $1 from your side project. Like that's actually really impressive. And so like don't go and like try to like create like a to-do list or something like that, because literally you can prompt an AI and it can one-shot a to-do list. So that's not a valuable skill. What is a valuable skill is like making a program that's useful for somebody, so useful that they will give you $1. So like $1 actually differentiates you by quite a bit. And so like go get your degree if you want to, but it's not necessary. Like go find 4 of your friends that also can't find a job right now, and then like start a company. Start like 4 companies and like rapidly prototype and make your own experience, right? Like take the knowledge that you have accrued, learning a language, frameworks, like leaning into AI, and like go make something in the world. You don't need a big company to do that. Actually, I think that big companies and big tech are too slow to adopt AI stuff. Think about Apple's, Amazon's, the Googles of the world. Like, how have they integrated AI into their products in a way that's actually next level? Nobody has done it. Like, I don't even know what Apple AI does.
Apple has been terrible on this. I think famously terrible, where they're literally getting sued in multiple lawsuits about their false advertising with bringing like Siri AI and Apple Intelligence, and none of it really works at all.
Like, I think the best AI feature for Amazon is like the review summarization feature.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Like that's pretty useful. I think that's great.
Yeah. It's a bare minimum, right? It's literally just text being summarized, right?
So outside of the foundational model stuff, right? Obviously, the people that are actually building next level AI software services and products, they're small. They're super scrappy. They have between like 1 and 20 employees, and they're using AI to amplify their team. And so I think that like going out on your own or within a small group, that's a differentiator, instead of being like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to graduate, go into a really large company, and then just like draw this regular paycheck from them. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? That may stay stable, that may go into a downturn, it may increase. But like going out on your own, like it's never been a better time to do that.
Really quick, guys. I've personally worked with hundreds of computer science students and software engineers to help them land incredible high-paying jobs in tech over the past few years. And from that experience, I put together a resource breaking down the top 5 lessons I learned throughout that process. We'll go through the biggest mistakes people make when trying to land a job or internship in tech, and everything you need to kickstart your software engineering career. It's available completely for free at amanmanazir.com/7dayengineer, or check the link in the description. So taking a step back here, you mentioned how you can go into your degree if you want to, but it's not kind of necessary. Do you think it's even useful? Because I'm thinking about, I recently did my degree. I only graduated a couple of years back. So I kind of have like a recent perspective on this. What you learn in a computer science degree, sure, it's somewhat useful. I mean, you learn data structures and algorithms, you learn operating systems, you learn math stuff, you learn some stuff, user interfaces, stuff like that, right? But is it even relevant? Like, would you even say that someone should do a degree or not nowadays?
Like I said, you should do it if it's interesting to you. If the idea of not graduating with a degree really bears on your soul. I do think that generally anything that you learn in college, you can learn on your own if you're so motivated. The real value, I think, of a university degree is all of the relationships and networking that you got, like your friend group that you still talk to, potentially the professors that you spoken with. If you have your own network, if you can go and build your own network or integrate yourself with an existing network, why bother, right? And so I don't think about a degree as like a strictly necessary dependency for having a successful career. See it as an optional side quest. But if you can get what you need elsewhere, why bother? Even on that note, so I went to University of Wisconsin. It's not like Harvard or something, but it's a decent computer science school. On Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. Go Badgers. Yeah. And I'm thinking about what was the value from that. I think, obviously it helped me get some internships. I think it was a good enough name to be like, okay, maybe we consider this resume when getting that first interview. But on your note about network, honestly, I know a couple people who are doing really interesting things, but the network that I grew from having my own brand is exponentially more than just having a degree at a school like Wisconsin, Yeah. And I think to people who, went to maybe UC Berkeley or MIT or Harvard, I think that's maybe a case of its own where, those high, like Caltech, these Ivy League schools, the top 10 schools in the country, I think there still may be some value because almost every single person who goes there and is, doing well is doing something interesting. So maybe that's a benefit, but
now, what I would say, if you want to if you're just talking about software development, I'm not talking about research scientists or applied scientists, but if you're just talking about software development, the school that you went to is relevant for that entry level job. Okay, cool. You went to Berkeley, you went to, MIT. Great. You're going to have an easier time getting that interview, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get the job. And then when you are maybe job hopping later, when you have you're a mid or a senior or above, they literally won't look at what school you went to. They're just going to be looking at your work experience. So you think of it as a boost for those top tier schools. It's like a boost for that one stage that's there. And obviously, I think they have really great networks. Now, if you're talking about research science, and you want to be an AI researcher, yeah, go put Stanford on your that's where it's strictly necessary because understanding where the that expanding boundary of knowledge is for AI, you're gonna have to get a PhD, and if you have a top tier institution that's there, you're gonna be very attractive to folks. And so I think for that mode, go get your degree because that's table stakes. For software development as we know it today, no, I don't think it's strictly necessary.
I agree. I think it depends on what you want to do, but the idea that go to college, I think, when you were talking about how if you died without a college degree, that would have been horrible. I feel like nowadays, unless you have those very specific things where it's okay, you want to be a top researcher at OpenAI, fine, you need a PhD to actually do that. If you want to be working at DeepMind, okay, fine. But just an average person who's going to the average state school, or even going to the average private school and spending over $100,000 for that degree, I think there are far, far, far better areas you can invest that, not only to get the network, but to make a return on your investment far faster and even more relevant skills even faster.
I think the problem is at that time in your life, you don't have a goal. Typically, right? But you're being pushed to by society, by the track that you're on, by your family. They're like, what do you want to, like, my mom was like, do you want to be a doctor or a dentist? Like, you get to choose, And so like, you get nudged into these things. And like, there wasn't a lot of like, okay, like, I want to be this. And so in a situation where, you're like this rat and you're looking around and there's no cheese anywhere, and then people are like asking you like, hey, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? School is a default mode. You get to you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to, University of Wisconsin at Madison, and I'm taking some classes, and okay, well, computer science like looks good. And so you get to sort of like, you get a track put in front of you. And I think not discounting that is important. Especially when you're 18 to 22 years old, like you don't know what you want to do with your life. And you look at all of these other people around and you're like, oh my God, it must be nice to know what you want to do and then get really good at it and get really competent at it. And then you look at yourself and you're like, well, what am I doing? And then you will graduate college and then you're like, well, I guess it's time to get a job. But you haven't really thought about like what you want, or at least that was the situation for me. And so I think that like the thing that's much more valuable than a college degree is just knowing what you would like to do. Like having a direction. I would have paid infinite money in, 18, 20 years old, 22, or at least whatever I had, which wasn't very much. But I placed such a high value on people that like knew what they wanted. And if you can figure that out, then I think that you're going to be in a wonderful spot. And no, you don't need a college degree for pretty much anything unless it's very specialized, like being a researcher or being like a doctor or dentist. Like, yeah, you need to go to school for that sort of stuff. But for software development, for starting your own business, for whatever it is, like the internet's great.
It's an incredible point, because when I think about the people in my life who are the most driven, they're accomplishing the most things, they have a goal. And that's kind of underrated, honestly. It's just like, I feel like we don't emphasize how powerful it is just to know where you're going. Not even to have done anything so far, but just to have one direction that you've stuck to for several years, up to a decade, and just to continue to work at that. Because I really like the line, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And the line that's like, okay, pick this one thing and just stick to that and do it. For me, like I've been on YouTube for the past 5 years, and I'm really surprised. I'm like, I guess it worked out because I just like picked one thing and I was like, I just want this one thing. And like, if you bang your head against a wall for enough time, it's going to work out. I have friends who like their one thing is being a doctor, and I am so confident that it's going to work out for them, because if they just pick that one thing and go for it.
You could have been a doctor. I could have been a doctor. We like, if I was like 18 years old and I'm like, I want to be a doctor. Now there are weeder classes and all of this other stuff, and it's like a lot of work. I'm like 100% confident that I would be able to get there, right? And so that's why I think that people who do career switches, they tend to understand that the thing that they're currently doing is not the thing. And so they're like, okay, well, if I'm going to switch, I'm going to make sure that I like crush it. Right? Like they don't mess around. If you go to like a college and then there's like somebody that's not, that 18 to 22, they're maybe in their late 20s or in their 30s or something like that, or later, and they happen to be in your class, like they're not messing around, right? Yeah. Like they're there for a reason. I was there messing around because I was just supposed to go to school, because that's what you did after you went to high school.
Yeah, I think it's funny when again, like me too, when I was in college, I was kind of messing around here and there. But as soon as I started to like invest in business resources and coaching for my business and YouTube, I was not messing around there. I would show up to every single call, do all the homework. I was 100% focused. So I think that dynamic where when someone knows what they want and is going for it, I think it's totally underrated.
And like I said, I'm in my 40s now. I remember being, in my early 20s, like your age, and in some sense, I'm like the same guy. But I've also matured quite a bit on a number of different dimensions. And so like the fact is, like whatever choice you make in your early 20s, like none of this stuff is irreversible. So just like, I think the best advice would be like, hey, in your early 20s, just make a choice and then know you can switch it later with essentially no consequences, as long as you have like food and shelter. like you're gonna be okay. Like what other time period in your life are you gonna have essentially a safety net? I can't do it now, but like, you know, if things fail, like went awry for you, you just go live with your parents. Like, it's gonna be fine.
That was one of the greatest solaces for me when I actually left my job about a year and a half ago. It was not only that kind of like FTE, but it was the realization I had this. I don't know why I didn't realize it before. I was like, wait, I could just call my dad and be like, can I just stay in my childhood home?
Yeah.
And the way I justified it in my mind was, okay, half these kids are doing their masters anyway and blowing like 40K on a random degree anyway.
Yeah.
So I can just easily take 1 or 2 years out, see if I can grow this channel, grow a business, and just sleep on my parents' couch. And they wouldn't care. They're fine with it, as long as I was, you know, safe. And I'm at that point in my career in life where it was totally possible to do that.
Well, I think, you know, you also come from an Asian family. Like my mom wanted, like, just expected that I was going to live at home.
Exactly.
Like during college, and because I lived in the Seattle area, and I'm like, nope, I'm going out on my own. Like I was just like, there's this rush. And so like part of me is just like, man, like, you know, there's all these newspaper articles about, you know, people like having to go and go live with their parents again. And I'm like, I wish I could go and live with my parents again. You know, things have changed so much, but like they're there to help support you. And so like just really look at, especially if you're young, is like, what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you have to move in with your parents again and you have to try something else. That's really great. What a wonderful, like, that's an advantage, because for me, like if it doesn't work out, like I have a family to support and a mortgage and, you know, and dogs, and like I can't just like I can't just like disappear for 2 weeks and then come back. I have obligations. Like when you're 22, you could disappear for a month and then just kind of come back. You'd be like, oh, I was just backpacking through Europe or whatever, and then staying at hostels, and like that's a strength. That's a benefit. That's next level.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the value of having no responsibilities and having no one to account for, and also just having that freedom and flexibility, such that the very worst case scenario is that you stay with your parents, which people like anyway. Like a lot of people want to live at home because they care about their parents.
Well, there's this weird thing, because you're just basically like, well, what am I supposed to do, right? People are looking for that one thing, but the thing is, like, if you don't have it, it's totally okay to just like try to figure out what you want. But we have this anxiety that we haven't chosen what our career is going to be for the rest of our life at 22, which is insane. Because like, you know, now that I'm older, it's just like, I don't think my brain was fully formed when I was 22. You know, I don't think I had the tools. And so, you know, it's just this confluence of like identity and societal pressure and the fact that we live in a capitalistic society, and, you know, the fact that things are getting so disrupted, like these traditional tracks are going away. But I think that the tracks are there as like a default mode. And I think when they get taken away or get disrupted, it's actually a strength for those of us that are like okay with taking chances. It's just like realizing that you kind of got put on this like train, but you can step off at any time.
Absolutely. I want to bring it back to some software engineering questions I have.
Of course.
One thing I like about your background and your content is that you're making content for a much more advanced person in their career a lot of the time. I think my content and a lot of people kind of in the similar niche, it's a very much about interns, new grads. And I think it makes sense for a couple of reasons. One being that there's just a lot more people earlier in their career than later. So it makes sense that there's going to be more creators earlier in their career. And also, usually people in the younger generation use social media more, and they're also more comfortable putting themselves out there. So it makes sense why there's a million people who are kind of making content for college students and new grads. So one question I have for you is, why do people stagnate in their career? What is the biggest couple mistakes people make when they get to 5, 6, 7 years and they're not getting to that senior or principal level?
Is because it's a lot like the conversation that we've had. You know, you go to school, you get a job. You know, my mom was like, hey, go to school, get a job, you know, go get a wife, buy a house, you have kids. And then like, That's all she had in her playbook. That was it. Maybe, there might be something else, but like, then I'm like, okay, cool. Like you're really forced to sort of like think about what you want to do. But the default is inertia. The default is like, you've gotten that thing that you've been working for a long time. And then, now you're just kind of coasting. And so I think for people that get stuck, there's two roads here. One is like, they haven't been trying because they're not getting pushed. Or the other mode is they'd really like to get to the next level, but they don't know how. There's something that's holding them back. The two very different things. And so I think that generally people that are missing something, what it is typically is as you get higher and higher in software development, there's just more people you need to interact with. Basically, you could have a feature or like a bug fix is like, maybe a small feature is like a one-person job. Or maybe like, an extension to, from small feature to like medium-sized feature, or you're building a new capability within an existing system. That's like a mid-level sort of thing. But then if you want to go higher than that, it's like, hey, we would like to launch a new line of business, or we want to fundamentally change like the way that the system works. We need to scale it out, whatever it is. That's just going to require more people. There's more coordination, there's more alignment, but also, the amount of variables increases quite a bit. But now you need to talk to people. You need to be like, Aman, hey, I need you to build this thing before I can build my thing. And then you're just like, go away, Steve, I'm doing my own thing. And then you're like, okay, how do I proceed? Right? And so like all of a sudden you need to be like communicating with people. You have to be, persuasive. You have to make arguments. You have to understand that, like how things get done, right? The politics of the situation, the power dynamics that are going on. And people don't get taught any of that stuff. They get taught like, here's the algorithm, right? They get taught like, hey, here's how you scale out a service or whatever it is. But they don't teach you like how to get Aman to do the thing that I need so that we can like finish this thing, right? And it's this problem that's a combination of tech, it's a combination of like product, it's a combination of project, but then it's also like interpersonal skills.
It sounds like persuasion is one of those biggest things here that actually makes a difference when someone is not getting promoted. It seems like, based on what you said there, it's that one big reason why is because they're kind of just stuck doing the level that they are currently at, and they haven't like ascended, which is taking on a bigger scope, being able to work with not just your team, but multiple teams or multiple departments at the company, and being able to work together, put the pieces together with the whole business as a whole. Yeah,
perspective is the big thing there, and visibility. So basically, when you're like an entry level or junior, like people will just give you stuff that's really bounded, and it's a relatively straightforward problem. When you get to mid, like now you need to like, hey, now there's the dependency issue, or like there's a really like subtle bug inside of the code that you need to find, or you need to be sort of independent and understand how the software development lifecycle works. When you get to senior, now you need to like harness your team to do as much as you can with 5, 6, 7, 10 people inside of the team, and the tech doesn't go away. You're still writing code. You're still designing systems, but now we need to start talking about things like influence, right? And so we need to like. My definition for influence is like, what do they like? Are your ideas still there when you're not in the room? There's no leak code when you get into your job. I've used recursion like one time in my entire career, right? How many times do you use recursion in leak code? It's like every other question is like recursive, right?
Hundreds of hours of recursion when doing leak code.
and so it's like, cool. Maybe you'll get something where everything is spec'd out and then you need to go and implement a function. Typically, like that stuff stops when you become a mid, right? It's super ambiguous, even what the problem is that you need to solve. And so like, how do you deal with ambiguity? Like, how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do next? Well, you can't leak code your way out of that, right? And so, I think a lot of that comes from experience. The saying that I have is like, the gatehouse doesn't resemble the clubhouse, right? So the gatehouse is like leak code and system design stuff. So now you're in the company. And then when you join the company, like you almost have to forget all of that interview prep that you did. Now you have to like do a whole bunch of other skills. And also at the same time, nobody is pushing you, right? There's no test anymore. There's no more like achievement that you need to make. Now you're making decent money and, you know, nobody is asking you really to do anything. And so if you don't have that good sense of like where you want to go, like we've been talking about, you're going to sit there for 5 years. You're going to blink and you're going to be like, hey, I've been here for 5 years, like, and I've been in the same spot.
You famously left your near 20-year career at Amazon over the past few years. So a big question I have here is, first of all, why stay at Amazon for 18 years? Why, keep ascending at one company? Why not leave earlier? Why not career hop more? And the second question is here, with that insanely high successful salary, why even leave? Why not just kind of coast at that principal engineer level and just collect the paycheck?
Yeah. So I'll answer the first question, which is like, why stay for so long? Ultimately, well, two things. One, a big tech company is a wonderful place to be if you're curious. Like, how do ordering systems work? How does AWS work? How does any of this stuff work? How does search work for products? What are the rendering technologies that are involved? It's like, none of that stuff about how Amazon does it is out in the open. And so if you want to like go in there and figure it out, you can just go and download the source code and take a look around and maybe there's some stuff that is secret, but like essentially it's an open place. And so you can kind of like understand how one tech company does all of this stuff. And that's just not out there. So that's one. Two, I think there are a ton of smart people that are there. And one of the things that I've recognized in my career is like having a good manager and working alongside people that are really good. That just makes you better. And so, once I realized that, anytime I wasn't working with people that I thought were growing me, I would just go and try to find another team. So that's two. And I think the third thing is to get past senior engineer, I think requires that you put roots down. If you go on the LinkedIn profiles of anybody that's at staff, principal, senior principal, distinguished, member of technical fellow, whatever, you're going to find that there was a time period. Generally, there's a time period where they stayed for 4 or 5 years and put roots down, and then they were able to get to that next level. And so I think early career, yeah, you should job hop. You're going to make more money at the end of the day. But if you're trying to get to that next level, to the highest levels, you're unlikely to get to those levels through job hopping. Because I think at that point, the problems become so big that like your effectiveness, like the type of impact that you can have over 6 months, a year, 2 years is going to be limited.
And why leave? Why not just continue working at Amazon?
I started the YouTube channel in 2021, early 20. We started around the same time. I started in I had the idea that I wanted to do it in Q4 of 2020, and then so I published my first video in 21. I think everybody faces this when you make your first video. You get super excited and you hit the publish button, and then nobody watches it. And so I made 5 videos and then I stopped. Then for some reason, the last video that I made, it got popular, and then it turns out the second video of mine that I ever created, just sort of popped off. But the AdSense money wasn't that great. But over time, I started taking on sponsors and stuff like that, and the side business, it was starting to become difficult to ignore. I got to the point with my content that I was I can't do the things that I want to do and also work. And so I made the decision. I'm okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is I go back to my job, and some people on the internet go haha, way to try, loser. But the best case scenario was that the upside is uncapped, right? And then I can live the life that I want. Like I love making content and up-leveling other people. And so I know for a fact that if I was on my deathbed, I would have regretted not taking a chance on myself. And so given that the downside was essentially capped, but the upside was infinite, I thought, okay, like let's try it out.
Awesome. Well, where should we send people if they want to connect with you or watch more of your content?
Yeah, my YouTube channel. So it's at A Life Engineered, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
That's today's episode of the Software Engineering Accelerator podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you want early access to every single one of these episodes, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other podcast app and follow the Software Engineering Accelerator podcast. That's right. You can listen to every episode early on the podcast apps before they get released on YouTube. So make sure to go over and follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and turn on notifications or check the links in the description. And finally, always remember, help will always be given to those who ask for it. So click the top link in the description if you want our help to accelerate your software engineering career and land your dream job or internship.